Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to TSN Webinar Series. Today's topic is the attendee experience, more tips, tricks, and technology to keep them coming back. We'd like to thank you for attending and thank our sponsors, MCCA, Vantage Boston, and MarketArt, as well as ShowNets for bringing this presentation to you. The Boston Convention and Exhibition Center and the Heinz Convention Center were designed with your needs in mind, from fully customizable exhibition and meeting spaces to free wireless internet access, state-of-the-art technology services, and much more. At MarketArt, You Are Here web, mobile, and floor solutions help give your attendees a great experience, and they'll talk about with the others year after year. The You Are Here solution helps you deliver everything, and your attendees need to enjoy your event and maximize productivity. And ShowNets provides custom trade show internet services that allow event producers and coordinators to have a successful event. Hi, my name's Hillary, and I'll be your webinar host today. And I'd like to take a few seconds to go over some tips using the webinar platform. First, if you haven't used GoTo before, please note that on the right-hand side of your desktop is the control panel. It looks like this. And within it is an area called Audio. Please make sure you've clicked the correct icon, either use telephone or use mic and speakers. Also, if you'd like to ask a question, there's a chat or a question box, and you can click that and type in your questions at any time. And if this panel gets a bit distracting, you can click the double arrow key at the top left on the Grab tab. That'll minimize the panel. Then later on, if you want to ask a question, just click it again, and the panel will reappear. Also, if you'd like to ask a question on Twitter, you can go to hashtag Attendex. That's ATTENDEX. Now, this is a live and interactive program, so please note we will be recording it, and within 2 days, the recording and the slide deck will be available on tsn.com if you'd like to get a copy of that. Well, now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Michelle Bruno. Michelle is a former meeting planner and exhibition organizer who writes and blogs for leading meetings and exhibition industry publication. She develops content marketing strategies and content that drives and lead generation campaigns for live event organizers, suppliers, and technology companies. And she's published over 150 articles and white papers on meeting and exhibition logistics, marketing, and technology for event industry publications and the Center for Exhibition Industry Research. Well, now I'm going to turn the presentation over to you, Michelle. Welcome.
Thank you.
And Michelle, I'm not hearing you just right now.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Terrific. Yes, now I can.
Okay. Oh, dear me. Here we go.
There we go. Perfect.
Okay. So good morning, everyone, and thank you so much, Hillary, for introducing me. Many of you that are in the audience, I know you know me, but I want to just let you know that I've sort of made the rounds. I've been in exhibitions and meetings in the event industry for almost 25 years. And I've done my time as a supplier, as an exhibition organizer, as a meeting planner, and now as a writer and a content developer. And I think I have a perspective that I hope you'll find interesting, and I certainly hope it prompts as many questions as it answers. And at the end of the session, we'll have a Q&A period. So take some notes and make sure you have your questions ready, and I'd be happy to answer them. But the whole presentation today is sort of part 2 of one we gave last month, where we talked about the attendee experience. We went over some technology, and I'll review some of those things again today. But the basic premise is that our industry is undergoing an absolutely profound shift. And one of the difficulties we're having as event planners is trying to understand what that shift is, how we can regroup in order to meet the demands of our customer base. And I looked in reviewing articles that I've written and interviews that I've done with people. Whoop. Did you get that, Hillary? I lost it. There we go. Thanks. I I've looked at a lot of different angles for trying to understand the attendee experience, how we as event organizers can make good choices about programming and technology, and how to do, craft an event that really appeals to the attendee at a very deep level. So today we're going to kind of talk through a couple of the different things that I found, starting with the TSNN survey results. A lot of you in the audience filled out the survey, both for an opportunity to win the iPad and also to give us some feedback on what it is that you're thinking about your experience, especially as it has to do with technology. We're going to go through that survey. We're going to start really talking about how to move attendees, live attendees, people that physically attended your event, into an overall community in order to be able to create this larger group that we can, as organizers, can work with, and that can attend our meetings live or virtually or in a number of different ways. We're going to do a quick review of the framework that I've developed, this hierarchy of attendee needs, so that you can understand where I'm coming from when we then talk about secondary attendees, which are really the sort of influencers. They may not be the people that actually ever attend, either physically or virtually, but they're out there. They're thought leaders and they're influencers. And we need to pay attention to what their needs are as well for information. And we'll also talk about enhancing the virtual attendee experience. As you know, many of our live event organizers and trade associations are going to hybrid experiences. And there's some things that you should know about how to bring virtual attendees into, how to enhance their experience. We're going to also talk about international attendees. It is a growing sort of movement. There are more and more attendees coming to our shows from international points of origin. And I thought it would be really interesting to take this same framework that I use to look at live attendee experiences and sort of play around with it and see if it still works for some people with entirely different motivations and cultural backgrounds. And then finally, we're going to talk about this notion of a continuum of experience, the idea that being an attendee extends far beyond the live on-site experience. So first of all, kind of going through, TSNN did a wonderful job in putting this survey together, and I thought it was very telling in a number of ways. First of all, they asked everyone, all the survey respondents, how important it is for you to have an internet access. That seems sort of like a no-brainer, and obviously 90% of the people that responded said it was either important or extremely important. What that says to me, however, is that there are a whole lot of people walking around with electronics, both their smartphones and their iPads and their computers. That's what they're using to access the internet. So not only do we have to think about where the Wi-Fi is accessible, we have to think about where people can plug in to charge up all these electronics. And that was a big part of my original post that prompted this two-part webinar series for people to really think about those connections. And I know I know that people know what I mean, because it even happens in airports. You come through security, you're going up the stairs, you're walking to the gate, you start thinking about what you're going to do for your hour that you have to kill before you jump on the plane. And what do? You start staring at plugs, and you see people clustered around, outlets and ways to charge your phone and your computer. Well, the same thing is happening on show site. So this question really points out a key area for enhancing the attendee experience in the future, having a lot of places to plug in and recharge. So this question of Wi-Fi, free Wi-Fi, first of all, our respondents think that Wi-Fi should be free. Pretty much, 87% believed that Wi-Fi should be available and it should be free and it should be everywhere. But the next question is really telling too, because who's supposed to pay for it? 55% of our respondents believe the venue should pay for it and give it to attendees and people in the convention centers for free. And hotels pay attention to this as well, because the same logic applies. So this Wi-Fi, this need for the pipeline, is going to really affect decision-making both for planners in the future and for venues, because they have to work hand-in-hand to create this attendee experience. And then secondarily, 30% of our respondents believe that show management should be paying for it, which you know means that at some point, the price to participate as an attendee is probably going to go up unless someone sees this as a wonderful sponsorship opportunity and figures out a way for sponsors to really get some mileage out of sponsoring the Wi-Fi. But this Wi-Fi question is really, really interesting. So platform integration. I see the responses were pretty interesting to me in that a large group said uncertain. They were indicating they really didn't either understand the question or the technology is still sort of a mystery to them. To me, this sort of question speaks to the idea that you could, for example, have a mobile device that does multiple things. It allows you to have the trade show floor experience. It allows you to access the web and event scheduling and calendars. So to me, the question was really asking, is it important for this technology to sort of converge from a number of different platforms into one, which was a trend we talked about at the last webinar, or are you comfortable having, a mobile phone in one pocket and then going to a kiosk to look for a floor plan at another moment, and then using your PC to email and communicate and tweet and have your social media experience? So I don't know if the respondents fully understood what the question was about, but I think the responses being sort of evenly split between extremely important and I don't know what you're talking about kind of indicates to me that maybe there's still some confusion out there about technology and the meaning of platform integration. The most useful technologies, again, when we talk about the hierarchy of attendee experience, this will become more relevant because sort of the lower rung of the hierarchy is the utility aspects, the being able to experience and navigate the event. And our respondents said that 66% of the respondents said that the touchscreens for directories and mapping were the most important technology for on-site, seconded only by really the QR codes, which is really interesting to me because there's been an ongoing debate on Twitter and in LinkedIn and some of the social spaces about the usefulness of QR codes. I can tell you that 2 weeks ago at Blog World there was a QR code every 15 feet, and people, snapping using their QR code readers. In fact, the main sponsor, Ford Motor Company, covered their brand new car that they're rolling out, I think, this week at the Los Angeles Car Show. They had the car shrouded, but it was covered with QR codes. So people could go up and capture the QR code on their smartphones, and it would take them to different experiences online. So this QR code business is really curious to me because there's a lot of people that think it's dumb or it's not useful, but you can see that our community, you out there that are listening to this webinar, think that QR codes, which I happen to agree with, hold some promise and are very interesting going forward. And then thirdly, the kiosks, the on-site kiosks. So I'm sort of taking this to mean that the touchscreen directories and mapping could also mean mobile, and the kiosks would mean the on-site screens. So those things, those three things are the things that are affecting attendees. This is what we want as attendees, and this is what event organizers should be paying attention to. The fact that people didn't really get too jazzed about a Genius bar where they could get answers, that's curious to me too, because I know there's a lot of people that are walking around wanting answers to their technology questions, so I find that curious. Again, the QR code discussion. If you've got a QR code and you're buying into the value of QR codes, it's pretty interesting that what attendees want to use the QR codes for is to get more exhibitor information. So that's something to really think about, both from an event planning perspective and providing the education to your exhibitors about the importance of QR codes for getting their content out there. And then the second area that people really were interested in is using QR codes for product information and also scanning badges. So you can see that this QR code phenomenon is only getting bigger, and they want it as this main utilitarian function to use in conjunction with mobile to get information about that show floor, get information about exhibitors. Security systems, I think this is kind of maybe a question that's more of interest to venues, but people were asked whether it was important or not important to them to have a security system on the exterior of the building or inside throughout the halls and the ballrooms and the common areas. I was curious about this, so I looked through the comments quite a bit, and they were, of the people that were sort of somewhat on the fence about security systems, they really didn't care one way or the other. It was the people that had shows with high-value items that were actually more concerned. So the people with jewelry shows or art and things like that are obviously more concerned about having security. But it doesn't seem, only 38% thought it was important and only 12% extremely important. It doesn't seem like it's a deal killer in terms of venues offering a security system. That's a question, a decision that event planners are going to have to make about choosing venues around that. The social coach question, in other words, do you want someone on site to be able to go to for advice and assistance, especially when it comes to social media, using Twitter and Facebook and Foursquare? The sort of split responses across the board, especially the folks that said, I'm uncertain. And when I looked through their replies, it was sort of like this was a pretty new concept. They weren't really sure what we were asking them. They thought it was important, but mostly they really didn't care too much about it. They were uncertain about whether they would want one or not. Probably if they had the experience having one, that might change, but the sort of even breakdown sort of means to me it's a relatively new concept. And then post-show content. This is a real opportunity area to me. Most of the respondents, 42%, 43%, said that they would consider purchasing post-show content. So, content that's captured either video or audio, or maybe even, there are companies that capture content in written form. They would pay for it. Most of it would want an a la carte experience where they could buy specific sessions. It is a real opportunity area for organizers, I think, who think that no one's going to pay for it. Now, one interesting thing is, among the responses of people that would not pay post-show for content, they said it was mainly because if I attend the show or the conference, I should get the content for free. So they're still interested in post-show content, but they just don't want to pay for it if they've actually attended. So that is an interesting statistic to me. And almost no one, only 16% said that they would not, even be interested at all. So I think this is, another area where we as organizers should look for monetizing our shows. The mobile apps. Again, this speaks to the sort of utilitarian function of mobile apps, but most of our respondents want to be using the mobile apps for schedules and access to maps and navigational tools. They really, weren't all that interested in being able to access local attractions and things like that. But I think part of that is because most of the apps that are out there are built precisely to enable them to use schedules and maps and all the different navigational tools. So I think that speaks more to what they're accustomed to, what's out there that's being offered already, and what it is that they need a mobile app for. So we're going to kind of get into the review section and of what we talked about last time in this idea of the hierarchy. But I wanted to also sort of touch on a couple of things that I wanted you to think about. So I have the drop in the water and the ever-expanding image here. But I want you to, when you're listening to what I have to say for the rest of the webinar, to expand your notion of attendee. What if the attendees are not physically in the room? What if they are from different types of backgrounds? And so the content and programming needs to be adjusted to sort of reach them and have them have an experience that is comparable to what someone who is, accustomed to attending trade shows and conferences here in the U.S. So what if they're from another country? Or what if they're not even attendees ever, remotely or physically? How do we influence the experience of these different groups? How do we change our programming? How do we make decisions around technology to influence attendees when they're not the sort of garden variety of attendee that we're normally used to? Do we then change the way we classify attendees? Do we classify them differently so that we can craft different content and programming for them? I also want you to think about the notion of this experience, the fact that now experiences begin long before our attendees arrive at the event. They continue long after our attendees leave the event, and they aren't even physical. They are now virtual. So when you combine all of these nuances into an attendee experience situation and framework, it's different. We'll be making different decisions and programming choices, and we'll have different, tricks and tips and technology to appeal to this sort of different, more expanded version of attendee and experience. And what the whole point of this exercise is to understand that as we give our attendees, whatever they are, wherever they come from, however they access our event, a richer experience, what we want to look at is converting them from simply live attendees to actual community members that we can tap into continuously. So I'm going to start with this idea of the hierarchy of needs. Some of you are familiar with Maslow. Abraham Maslow he came up with this theory of the hierarchy of needs back in the 40s, and it was really a discussion of human motivations. His theory suggests that the most basic level of needs must be met before each individual will move to the next level. So it's in a pyramid structure. In other words, they'll need to, have air, have water, have food, have sleep before they can even think about moving to the higher level, which is safety, and then so on and so on. And then once they're safe and they have their family and their health and their property secured, they can then move to the higher level, which is the sort of friendship and family and relationships and intimacy. And then they can even move to a higher level than that, which is sort of this self-esteem. And then finally to a level at the top where they're self-actualized. So I thought this was really interesting in terms of applying it to an attendee experience. And so I sort of looked at what we as attendees are looking for. And I keep switching from organizer to attendee and take various stakeholder roles. But the basic concept is the same. But rather than satisfying each different level of attendee needs before moving on to the next, I'm suggesting that event organizers have to hit on all the levels with effective strategies, with programming, technology, whatever it is that hits every single one of these levels in order to meet attendee needs. I think these are all critical aspects of the attendee experience, and if each of the levels are addressed fully, you'll be able to turn your attendees into fans, and then you'll be able to capture their interest and turn them into members of your community. So they'll go from zombies just kind of wandering around the conference and the trade show to people that are really fully engaged, that we understand from a holistic point of view, and will leave our events absolutely transformed. So I'm going to explain each level sort of on its own so that you'll get a better understanding later on when we kind of add the different nuances. So this utility level, this is where attendees really need to experience and understand our event at a very basic level. So we're talking about even something like food and beverage, or the way that we have the registration system set up so that they can register easily. Signage. It's very interesting that, for example, Dallas Cowboys Stadium, as large of a venue as that is, they have very few signs. And when they have crowds of people visiting and attending events, they use humans for directional use. So they have human arrows, as we used to call them, instead of signs. And they do that because they want the attendee experience to be very rich and very memorable. Another example is at Content Marketing Institute, which I attended, I think in October. They did a very good job of letting attendees know that from the moment that they walked off of the airplane, they mapped out our journey, for example. They gave us information on how to walk literally from the gate to the metro. They gave us free metro passes with barcodes that we could scan at the metro stop. They told us how to get on the metro and how to take it exactly to our hotel. And they chose a hotel that was at the end of the metro line. So we walked about 100 yards through one doorway, and there was the hotel where the conference was hosted and where most of the attendees were staying. So they did a very good job from a utilitarian aspect of making our experience very simple and easy to navigate. And that's one thing that event organizers really have to think about. The experience just doesn't happen there in the show when we walk in the front door. It happens far before that and extends far beyond that. And then let's not forget how critical a role the venue plays in this sort of, at this utility level. Again, 90% of the respondents in our survey thought that the internet access was as important or extremely important, and that it should be free and that the venue should pay for it. So at this utility level, the venue and what the venue offerings are very important in terms of making decisions about where to hold the event. And not a lot, but many venues now are starting to offer free Wi-Fi. So if you're in a position to move your event around, that may be something that you look at from an organizational standpoint. But there's also, on the utility discussion, the idea of exhibitor directories. Should I go with paper? Should I go with a mobile app? That will depend entirely on the audience you're trying to serve. What kind of floor plans should I make available? Again, should they be on kiosks? Should I hand out paper maps? And it even speaks to the idea of, Americans with disabilities accommodations and things like that. And later on, I'm going to talk about this in terms of international and virtual attendees. So the second level up is this idea of justification. Attendees need to have justification in order to confirm that their time spent at our events was worthwhile to them, and it was worthwhile to their bosses who are paying for them to participate. So event organizers have to carefully consider the simplicity, the choices, the ease with which attendees can capture this content. So again, I'm talking about QR codes. I'm talking about technology that we saw during the EIBTM Tech Watch, where one of the entrants had a digital tote bag, or you're able to text a number through your mobile phone, and digital information will go to your sort of briefcase and tote bag that you can take home. It also speaks to the kind of programming and speakers and content that you're offering in the conference session. You need to be thinking about whether or not these choices, the programming, the technology, are justifying whether or not it was worth it for this attendee to attend your event and stay, because it's very, very difficult. There's a lot of competition now for the attendee mindshare, and if your event is not justifying why they're there, you're losing them, and you're not reaching all of these levels on the hierarchy that you should. And furthermore, the mobile apps, for example, are very good at justification, especially because they're hitting the utility area. They're enabling you to navigate the event, but they're also allowing you to justify, because you can grab all the digital content from exhibitors and from the different conferences and speakers and keep it and send it back to your own holding place, or email it to yourself so that you have that justification when you're done. The next level is this idea of connection, and live events do this very, very well. This is really what I call the sweet spot for events. This is why live events exist. The connection is obviously richer in a face-to-face environment, but that doesn't mean that it's not important for virtual attendees to experience some level of connection. If organizers, however, don't address this need of connection, attendees will do it themselves. It's interesting, before I went to Blog World, they didn't publish who was actually going in advance. So there were a lot of different websites, and there was a guy that was actually manually finding out where people from each state, their Twitter accounts, he plotted them on a website so that when we all got there, we could tweet and connect with people that were from our own areas. So if you as an organizer don't address this need for attendees to connect, the attendees will automatically do it, but they'll do it sort of outside your area of influence. And while it's good that they're doing it, what it says to me is that they want it. And as event organizers, we should be paying more attention. But it also speaks to in terms of offerings. The idea that matchmaking is critically important, the idea that we, as attendees, can be matched up with appropriate exhibitors, that we have the ability to communicate and connect with our peers. The social media aspects are critically important because we're communicating outside the event with each other on social media platforms. We want to be able to continue that communication and that connection inside the event and also before and after. These sort of like social face-to-face events, the receptions, and even games are critically important for this connection aspect. Flash mobs are a really interesting phenomenon. I know a lot of you saw the National Restaurant Association flash mob on YouTube, but that was an important way for attendees to connect before and during the event. Golf tournaments and those sorts of extracurricular activities play a very important role in events, not just to give your attendees exercise, but to have them a chance to connect outside the normal conference and trade show environment, collaboration exercises, and even place settings. There are organizers that will put place settings, people's names of attendees, during the lunch so that they can curate and make sure that attendees are sitting with people that foster connection. So another level is this idea of recognition. This is becoming, Jeff Hurt talks a lot about this, and I know he's giving another webinar next week, and I'm sure he'll touch on this, but the idea that attendees now really want to be recognized. And there are lots of different ways to do this. One way is at EIBTM next week or the week after, they're having a speaker's corner. So just ordinary citizens can go and stand on their soapbox and share ideas and things that are on their mind, or just say whatever's there or look for problems to be solved. These new types of things, including Twitter falls, Q&As, text walls, which is Twitter, like a Twitter fall, but people can text questions and ideas and thoughts onto the wall. I've seen that done. Again, gaming enters into this recognition phase where leaderboards, people that participate in the game appear at the top of the leaderboards. People play those games because they want recognition. Crowdsourcing ideas, using the crowd to bring in ideas for your conference programming. Very important for them to participate in that way. And then we talked last time about this concept of an innovation booth, and that is an idea that came to me from someone at the Pentagon, and he had this idea for just putting a booth, kind of a whiteboard in a booth space at a trade show, and allowing people to write notes and put down their ideas or have little impromptu discussions, kind of like a pop-up conference session, there in that booth with their colleagues so that people could exchange ideas. And I'm saying that if an organizer is really smart, they'll be there manning those booths, taking away the ideas and feedback from their attendees. But the real point is that people want to be recognized, and we as organizers need a way for them to be recognized at our events. And then finally, that top level is this idea that high-level transformation is becoming very, very important. I had a discussion this week with another attendee at an MPI, one of our chapter meetings, and we were talking about the fact that attendees today are coming to our events with a lot more emotional baggage than they used to come with. It isn't just that they're leaving their work behind, but they've got other things to think about. There's somewhat of a global meltdown going on, or they know people and family members that have lost jobs, or they've got to work just so much harder these days than they've had to before. And because of that, they're looking for events to fill a different role than they have in the past. And that role is kind of a transformational role. The way that we can do that is sometimes with having particularly motivational keynote speakers. Sometimes it's mentoring programs. Other times it's a Habitat for Humanity style charity outreach. People feel, and they've been polled, that when they have these opportunities to do community outreach, they find that the overall event has been more satisfying and a better experience for them. So let's talk about some different categories. When we start thinking about, our departure, our redefining of attendee experience to include some other types of different attendees. One type that I think about a lot are sort of the influencers, the people that are thought leaders, our bosses, are people that are currently outside of our community structure. These are people that may never ever come to a live event, but they can influence others to come. And I think that their experience, their exposure to our events is just as important, if not more important, than the exposure and the experience that we offer to our live attendees and our virtual attendees. So here are a couple of ways that I think that we can reach out to these people. And one is this idea of the continuous content generation. So associations are very good at this, but for-profit trade shows are kind of not as good at this. I was going to use the S word, but they're not as accustomed to having to create fillers to fill the gap between their live event from year to year. So they're paying more attention now to this idea that they need to constantly or consistently throughout the year also generate additional content. So they're hiring content managers to sort of organize content, to work on different outreaches using content. I'm talking about white papers. I'm talking about video, maybe podcasts, all of these different things that keep your live attendees and your community members engaged through the whole year. They're developing resource libraries. MPI ran across this a couple of years ago where they realized that they're capturing all this content year after year after year at their live events. But then after the event was over, they had no way of really organizing it so that people could come to their website, members, non-members, and access some of this content, maybe from a couple of years ago that was still valid and evergreen. So they're working on, using content management techniques to put these assets together. They're also using content for non-attendees and non-members and making the content shareable. South by Southwest does a really, really good job at this, and so does the Sundance Film Festival. Even if you didn't go to the film festival, you'll have an opportunity all throughout the year for additional showings of some of their films. And South by Southwest does this as well. They will send out almost every month, probably every month, really good sessions that were captured, video content, and they'll offer it for free to people throughout the year. And it just creates this hunger for people to want to attend the live event. So that's one way they kind of keep the love alive with their community. And then finally this notion of user-generated content, when you capture all this content at your event and you post it online, to make that accessible and available to everybody. A lot of people are doing blogger and thought leader outreach. And I saw a wonderful application at Blog World a couple of weeks ago. It was called eCairn, E-C-A-I-R-N, and cairn like the pile of rocks if you're a hiker, or people like that. They leave markers along the trail. It's a little pile of rocks called a cairn. Anyway, the software is able to do a visual map of who all the thought leaders are around your topic. So I put in the URL of my blog, for example, and this software will crawl my blog, pull out keywords, and it then gave me a visual map on screen of all of the thought leaders that are blogging about what I'm blogging about, or that are blogging on the topics that I'm blogging about or interested in. And this technology is coming forward. These are the kinds of things that, as event organizers, we'll be able to access to be able to do a better outreach to thought leaders and these secondary sort of attendees. And finally, this notion of community building and using our social media channels after the fact. There's a number of good shows that are doing an excellent job, especially with their blogs. The Machine Technology Association, AMT, the SHOT Show has a blog, doing a really, really good job using the blog, not just as pushing their event information out, but actually using it as sort of a sounding board for attendees. The Amusement Association, International Association of Amusement Parks, is doing a great job. They actually even live blog their booth sales every year on the blog, and that's how they keep their people that are selecting booths in line, and they're even using iPads now for booth selection. So The final thing is sort of this idea of using, attendee reviews. These peer reviews are very, very powerful, and someday, I mark my words, there'll be a TripAdvisor, but it'll be for attendees going to shows. Someone's going to come up with that. And if that's going to happen anyway, maybe we as organizers should think about organizing that sort of a forum or venue. I realize that's scary, but having some place where attendees can actually share experiences that the public can access, because they'll be mostly good experiences. And this is a way to actually get the word out to those secondary attendees. So I want to kind of get into the virtual attendee experience as well. This will become more and more important to us as the popularity and the usefulness of virtual and hybrid experiences comes more into play for us. But if we go back to the same framework for live attendees, I think it works pretty well for virtual attendees. The deployment, the way we go about it, maybe and is obviously, I think, a little bit different. But I want to say first that I believe that virtual and face-to-face are two entirely different experiences. And I think where we've gotten in trouble is that when we were developing these virtual experiences, we used the trade show metaphor. We made them look like booths. We made them look like conference halls, and we're still doing that. And it was an easy way for people with live events to understand how this could work in a virtual space. But I'm almost beginning to think that we shot ourselves in the foot by doing that, because what it did is really organize our attendee expectations for virtual events around the live event experience. And I think that got us a little bit in trouble. I think that some of the organizations that went into virtual events and hybrid events early on were kind of hooked on this metaphor, and so were their attendees. And they ran into a little bit of trouble because they didn't accommodate the expectations any differently for a virtual event, for a live event. I actually believe that a virtual event is superior to face-to-face in several ways. It has the ability to deliver rich media experiences that face-to-face does not. In contrast, face-to-face has the ability to deliver rich personal experiences. The area of connection on the hierarchy is much stronger in face-to-face than it is in a virtual. But what we should really be looking at is ways to look at this framework, see how it's deployed differently in both spaces, and then work to have these spaces work side by side to fill in the gaps with this continuum of experience that I'm going to talk about a little bit more in depth in a couple of slides. So looking at this, let's talk about utility. So for virtual attendees, this discussion is really around web access and making decisions between should you be able to allow access for your attendees via the web, via a web browser, or are we looking at software that people download? Most of the platforms now are browser accessible, but there's still some around there that'll use software downloads because they're offering a 3D experience. But this is an important question. This idea, how is it going to be easiest for our virtual attendees to access the virtual and hybrid experiences? Looking at web, looking at software, the idea that we are going to have to make sure that the platforms are solid and are tested on different computers. I've been really turned off by some platforms because I'm a Mac user and I haven't been able to use the full functionality of the platform because I have a Mac. And a lot of the platforms were built for PCs. So the idea that these have to be tested to make sure they work on different platforms, different computers, and different browsers is something to keep into consideration. There's also the idea of using a software as a service. So the whole platform is somewhere on a cloud or on a remote server versus there are now platform providers that have an actual appliance. It's a physical server that you own, and it sits in your office, and it serves up the virtual event from this server. So you don't have to really deal with, you own it. It's not licensed. So there are different choices. I'll talk a little bit more about them. So moving more up the ladder to this justification, I'm sorry if it's a little hard to read, but for virtual attendees, that to me talks about the quality and organization of the digital content. It has to be easy for them to take it away. Digital is really good at this. They have resource libraries. They allow you to build digital briefcases. But in making decisions as event organizers, in order to get an attendee experience that hits on this justification level, you've got to really think about how to capture the content, what content to capture, and keep the virtual attendee in mind, because where you're capturing it, how you're capturing it, what you're actually capturing may be different for a virtual attendee than it is for a live attendee. So keep that connection part in mind. The next level going up is the recognition. This is a little bit more difficult when if the attendees aren't in the room, but it's not impossible. And it's been really interesting to watch the event camps. The event camp Twin Cities, an event camp DC, an event camp Vancouver, an event camp EU, which was in London. These are sort of independent entrepreneurs that are out there that are doing this on their own dime to try to figure out this virtual hybrid experience, how you can bring virtual attendees into the fold. And they've done an excellent job in terms of experimenting. And some of the things that they've done, speaking to this recognition level, in the hybrid experience is, for example, having a virtual facilitator. So shout out to Emily Barta and some of the other folks that are filling this role. But she and these people are absolutely critical. Their sole function is to really bring the two worlds together. She's there to give Twitter shout outs to people that are tweeting, to ask questions of the virtual audience and answer them and bring the two sort of audience experiences together. The event camps have also experimented quite a bit with games that are both designed for virtual and live attendees, and they've done a fantastic job, and it's actually exhilarating. And I can say, having been a game participant both live and virtual, I can say that it's just as exciting when you're a virtual attendee. Sometimes it's a little more complex, so the games have to be simplified, but nonetheless, there are ways to add this gaming layer for virtual attendees that speak to this recognition that's so important. Having pods, so event camps, some of them use pods. So the main event camp is taking place live in one city, say Minnesota, and that's not a city, Minneapolis, and then they have pods. They had one in Poland, they had Amsterdam, they had Philadelphia, and various places. They had Silicon Valley, and they allowed the pods to check in. So while there were experiences going on at the main kind of mother location in Minneapolis, then the pods were doing activities in parallel, and then the pods had a chance to check into the main event, which we as virtual attendees could witness. There's Skype speakers that are brought in, so virtual chat recognition can be achieved with virtual attendees, and it's doable, and people are doing it. And then finally, this final level, the idea of understanding. I believe you can still do it with motivational messaging and motivational speakers, but I believe that the choice of speakers really have to be less about motivation and more about interesting, compelling content, sort of a TED sort of presentation, and someone that is really a speaker that's skilled in speaking on camera and from video, but I think it's doable. And then just when we think that there really are two experiences, the virtual and the physical, then there's Ollie. So I came across this. This is a little box that will translate digital signals into smells. So people always say when we talk about virtual, whenever there's a virtual honeymoon or you can go on a honeymoon virtually, then I'll know that, we're in trouble with face-to-face. Well, I'm just saying now, we're not in trouble. I don't think we ever will be, but I'm saying there are people out there working very hard to sort of blend these two experiences together. And pretty soon, the chocolate chip cookie at the virtual event will be coming to a computer near you. So finally, I know we're getting close to time, but I want to run through what we can do for international attendees. And I don't mean to lump them all into one category, because obviously they're from very different cultural backgrounds. But I think we can, again, look at this framework again. So when we talk about utility, we're really talking about signage. We're talking about mobile phones. So the signage, considering the idea that it should perhaps be in different languages or international icons so that they can understand the signage if they're non-English speakers. Using the mobile phone, it's very expensive for them to use their mobile phone from outside the U.S. and bring it to a U.S. event and then access online content because they're paying international rates for roaming. So that may be where, if we have a lot of international attendees, we may consider a native mobile app instead of a browser or a web-based application. We're talking about food offerings, being conscious of their cultural needs, and also the post-event content. Perhaps you consider subtitles in different languages or some main languages. If you have a lot of people from China or India, which is where a lot of international attendees are coming from, perhaps you consider having some subtitles and some of that if the international attendees are important. Justification. So they're looking as well to prove to their bosses back home that this was a good experience for them. So you might look at conference tracks, making more international, topics that are more internationally focused. Things like shipping and customs are always a big hit because they're, as buyers, they're going to be facing those types of issues. Having actual international speakers from other countries, and other content focused on the international buyer needs is a way to meet that justification level. Connection, they are wanting to connect even more so than we, because they know a lot less people usually. And so this is where the cocktail receptions, having perhaps an international concierge available to help them connect a little bit better, foreign language interpreters, maybe pre-arranged facilitated meetings. So allow them to use our matchmaking tools, but make sure that they understand how to use them and that perhaps there are language characteristics. Hello? And can you guys still hear me? Yeah. Okay, great. And then finally, this idea of recognition. Usually that's a little bit trickier with international participants, but you can look at recognition from the standpoint of team sports and team activities, or VIP programming, perhaps even awards for international participants. It's just something to think about. And then the understanding level, look at keynote speakers that talk about international themes that international participants can get behind as well. Finally, this notion of the continuum of experience, there are so many ways to carry on the live experience to a year-round sort of environment. The first thing is this idea of a persistent business environment. This is sort of the new flavor of virtual trade shows, the 365 persistent environment. They've really come around now, and it's not even where they have to look like a trade show anymore. The sort of environment, the metaphor can change. They can be business lounges. They can be a lot of different things. And in fact, some organizers that will have a live trade show or a hybrid, trade show conference look during the show will change the environment around after the show to be something different. And they'll use it like a web TV station. They'll broadcast different kinds of content. But in that way, they'll pull in their live attendees and they'll start building community. This ability to use their mobile apps for post-event content is also very, very important. And a lot of people that or organizers that buy an app bring that into consideration. What am I going to do with this app when the event is over? How can I continue to have content available for attendees after the show? Post-event video distribution, again, South by Southwest is really good at that. They'll send, kind of a video a month of one of their presentations, and it's really, really effective in keeping interest and building community year-round. The idea of social networking. So there are event-centric social networking platforms that now continue the experience. Pathable just rolled out their brand new version. And for example, that you can now, beyond social networking platforms, the same one for multiple events and talk to the same people. So that's coming around. This idea of event matchmaking, the same matchmaking that goes on at the live event should be going on year-round. And I consider this a tremendous opportunity for some platform developer that can come up with a way to keep that matchmaking going outside of the event. And I know some organizers are maybe not comfortable with that at this point, but it will be happening in the future, and it's a tremendous area for us to look at. Again, game mechanics. If we can do it at the event, we can do it outside of the event and have a gaming layer on our continuum before and after the live event. And of course, a lot of people are doing tweet chats. Blog World's sort of show wrap-up tweet chat was last night, and it was really effective. It was moving so fast I couldn't even keep up with it. So those are just some ways. Finally, in conclusion, to sort of sum it all up, we want to understand, I want you to walk away with the idea that the attendee has changed. They're there for the live event, but they're also tuning in virtually, and they may even be international. And we need to make choices, technology and otherwise, to appeal to this new kind of attendee. And the period of engagement has changed. It's not just 3 days. Now we're under pressure to keep that period of engagement year-round. So we need to be looking at tools and programming and technology that extends that live event. That's the continuum of experience I was talking about. And motivations of the attendees are the same. It's just that the execution has changed, and we have to look at the various ways to execute on the same, reach the attendees and their levels of motivation, but perhaps do it differently. And finally, the goal is really to take that live attendee and move it into the community so they can consume content in different ways all year long. So I thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to some of your questions.
Terrific. Well, thanks, Michelle, for sharing those tips and tricks and technology ideas. And before I open up Q&A, I'm going to leave Michelle's contact information up there, but would like to thank our sponsors, MCCA, Advantage Boston, and Market Art, as well as ShowNets for bringing this presentation to you. Market Arts You Are Here has been trusted by over 100 of the best events. And actually, can you bring that back for a second and put it up there?
I'm sorry.
Best events and trade shows in the world. And you can find out how they help make shows better for attendees, and you can visit them at marketarts.com to take a closer look. Also, Advantage Boston offers the accessibility to attract more attendees, the flexibility to meet your event needs, award-winning customer service from the Massachusetts Convention Center Authority and the Greater Boston Convention and Visitors Bureau, and the attractions of America's Walking City. And their team is dedicated to delivering your event your way. Also, ShowNets, who provides custom trade show internet services that allow event producers and coordinators to have a successful event. Well, now I'd like to open up Q&A. We've got a couple of minutes, so I want to get right to it. Michelle, can you give some examples and or describe a successful hybrid event, like live events within a virtual component?
There are more and more success events, hybrid events every day. 4 that I can point to right off the top of my head. HIMSS, they're a Chicago-based association, does a wonderful event, a wonderful job with virtual and hybrid all year round. They use hybrid platforms and virtual platforms for education and all kinds of purposes. So I would look at HIMSS for an excellent example. The American Dental Association is using virtual and hybrid platforms and working with an outside consulting firm to work on the attendee experience there. The American Institute of Architects, they've spoken at a number of different events and doing a really good job in monetizing their content through virtual platforms. And of course, the NAB, National Association of Broadcasters, has worked with virtual and hybrid platforms, for some time now. So they're doing a really good job too.
Great, thank you. We're getting a lot of questions in here, so I'm trying to get to them here. Regarding international attendees, we have many international attendees at our events. We've learned that it's important to not lock them into off-site dinner social events for hours. They need to be able to leave when they want to due to jet lag. Do you agree with that or have a comment on that?
Well, I know when I've been one in other countries, I would agree with that. I would first say nobody really likes to be locked into content and sessions, but on the other hand, I do think it's a good idea to help them be in social settings where they're with colleagues or people that share their same interests. Maybe not lock them in, but at least provide opportunities for them to, to be with people that are maybe on the same cultural level and are looking for the same things. I think that's been really successful. I've seen international receptions do that, and obviously they can lead whenever time, but then they're in a setting where they can be with other people that are coming at it from the same perspective that they are.
Great. Here's a question about videos. We are considering making videos of conference sessions available post-conference, probably for free to the attendees. But how do we deal with them potentially sharing it with coworkers, which could possibly affect the number of attendees a company sends? Like they'll send one person instead of 3, knowing that the sessions will be available after. Do you think it's a valid concern?
It hasn't panned out as much. That has been a concern, and it was a concern from the beginning. I would definitely say that you don't want to share all of your video, even if you're making them pay for it. Maybe just to do some, some of the sessions and things like that. But it's definitely a concern. But usually, what happens is the more people that see that video content want to go to the live event. So, usually it's like watching a sporting event. You get all excited and then you want to go see the football game, in the live stadium. So those concerns have not completely panned out, although there's still people deciding, one way or the other whether they want to do it. I wouldn't worry about it as much. I think it's more important to experiment, get it out there first, see what happens, see if there's some sort of precipitous drop in your live attendance, and if you can map that back to the fact that people were sharing your, videos, then you've got, reason to worry. But I wouldn't just go in with the idea that, they're going to share the content when they're not supposed to, and then they're not going to come.
Okay, great. I just want to squeeze in one question. I know we're at the top of the hour, and I also need to announce the iPad winner in just a second, but one more question. Do many show organizers currently offer social media space on Facebook and Twitter for their upcoming events? Do you think that that's something that they'd be interested in?
Well, you mean they manage communities, or they advertise on those things?
I think with their sites, putting in the people in the shows, the
exhibitors?
Yes.
So I'm not really understanding the question fully, but I can tell you that most organizers, most trade show for-profit organizers are utilizing some social media connections. I said most, but I would say a good number are creating their own, carving out their own outposts and spaces on existing public social media platforms in order to, keep conversations about their events going. On public platforms like Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and their blogs. What I will say is a lot of them aren't doing blogs. They're trying it, and certainly when they do blogs, it's not the executives that are blogging. So that would be one area that I think that they can improve in. But yeah, social media is getting it's getting more penetration in our our space, and I think people are finding it extremely valuable.
Okay, great. Well, I guess now's the time to announce that the iPad winner is Casey McNeil from Digestive Disease Week. Congratulations to you, and TSNN will reach out to you immediately after the webinar with that information.
And if anybody has more questions, they can tweet them out on Attendex, and I'll answer them there, or they can email me, michelle@brunogroup.com.
Terrific. Thank you, Michelle, so very much. And also, if you're going to be in the Vegas area, stop by Advantage Boston, booth number 140 at Expo in Las Vegas, and you can learn more with AdvantageBoston.com. You can also meet Market Art in person at booth 922 at the IAEE Expo. And for more information, you can always tune in to TSNN.com for updates on the webinar series, and we hope you'll be able to join us next week, Tuesday, November 22nd, as Jeff Hurt presents Unleashing Your Conference Participants to Become Energized Word-of-Mouth Influencers. So we hope to see you then. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today.